Hello, my name is Jay Mehmet, and in this brief presentation I'd like to talk to you about the research proposal outline. Now, of course, the first thing you start with is the title. And the title of your research paper should be short and succinct, but descriptive enough to capture the essence of what your study is about. In addition, it should be worded or phrased in such a way to capture the attention of the reader, but you need to do this in a way that involves good taste. The abstract is what comes next, but you do not write this until you have finished your project, until you have completed analyzing and interpreting your data, and after you have written up your results and your discussion sections. The first main section of your paper is the introduction, and under this rubric is included a number of subheadings. So you have your problem statement or problem formulation. What is the concern, the focus, the area of interest of your study? And you need to get to that very quickly in your opening paragraph of your paper. Then you need to address the significance of your study, answer the question, so what? Why should anybody care? Why should it matter that you are doing this study? And addressing the questions that you describe below. So then you talk about your research questions, and these would be your broad questions, and then your more specific and related study questions. You also need to identify your variables. And if this is an experimental study or a survey, then there are different terms that we use for variables. For example, if you're doing a descriptive study, then there are going to be certain demographic variables that you're going to use to group other variables, typically dependent variables, and we call those grouping variables. If you're using some type of experimental or quasi-experimental design and you're manipulating particular variables, then that would be, of course, your independent variables. If you're doing a survey, typically what we call independent variables in survey methodology is predictor variables. Then you have your dependent variables, which are the things that you're interested in measuring. In survey studies, we sometimes refer to dependent variables as criterion variables because we use those variables in regression analyses. Then the next main section is the literature review, and here you should synthesize and integrate the content of the articles, the book chapters, and the other sources that you have used to basically position your research subject relative to the knowledge base. And you can organize your literature review and your synthesis and integration of content by theme or some other organizing concept. Then there is the methodology section, and under this you would describe your method, whether it is a qualitative or a quantitative or mixed method study, and then more specifically if it's a survey method, if it's an experiment, quasi-experiment, if it's a single subject design, whatever. You would also, under a qualitative method, you would want to talk about if this is a phenomenological study, if it's an ethnographic study, if it's a grounded theory study, whatever. You need to talk about the underlying paradigm, which is really more of a philosophical reflection on the background of why you chose this particular method over another to answer the questions that you have. You need to then talk about the study design, and then your population and your sample, your investigative techniques, your instruments, your data collection procedures or protocols. You also need to discuss ethical issues with regard to human subject protections, and then you need to talk about any biases and assumptions that were operating in you and perhaps others if it's a research team as you are conducting the study. And then you need to talk about the data analysis plan. And this needs to be fairly detailed. Then there is the results section, and this is where you review your research questions and show how the data was analyzed to answer each of your research questions. And then you would address any other findings that were of interest to you and or to the readers. In the discussion, you focus on the meaning of your findings, and you discuss how the findings relate back to the research question and related study questions, and how your findings relate back to the professional literature. You also need to then talk about the strengths of your study, the limitations or weaknesses of your study, and then there needs to be a fairly extensive section where you talk about the implications of your findings and your study in terms of additional research that you or others might do, replication, change of design, change in sampling procedures, changes in instruments, whatever recommendations you're making to move the research along. If someone else was to come along, or if you're going to do follow-up of your research, what needs to be done next. You would also talk about the implications of your research in terms of social work practice, and you would talk about the implications in terms of policy and policy formulation. And then finally, you also need to talk about how your findings might relate back to the teaching of social work and how we as instructors in social work programs might address or incorporate some of the content that's related to your research subject into courses so that students are better prepared for research, for practice, for policy practice with regard to the specific subject matter that you're interested in and is the focus of your study. Finally, there is the references section, and you must include every single citation that you noted in the text of your report. The only exception is that you do not include personal communications. While you will cite those in the body of your report, you do not include personal communications in the references section. Finally, the last section is the appendices, and this is where you would put your tables, and then any other graphics, which would include figures, diagrams, photographs, graphs, charts, and so forth. And that's it. So if you have any questions, you can email me at j.mehmet@usd.edu, or you can call me at area code 605-357-1592.